Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to a special episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is an episode between regular Friday episodes. It's a between-isode, as Joanna Penn says. I will borrow that phrase from her. This is a interview or a chat that I did at noon Eastern on Monday, November 10th, 2025, with Matty Dalrymple and Angelique Fawns. Now, the three of us talked about strategies for short fiction. Now, in the show notes for this episode at starkreflections.ca, there will be a link to the full video so you can watch the video, although I think it's good for audio as well. We may have mentioned something and shown things, but for the most part, it was an audio experience. But again, there will be a link to the video as well in the show notes. But that's it. Because this is a special episode between episodes, I'm not going to do the additional introductory stuff that I normally do, and I'm not going to do the post-conversation or interview reflection. I'm just going to roll the bumper, and you're going to hear that hour-long interview or chat that Matty and Angelique and I did, and talking all about short fiction. So, the only thing I'm going to do is thank you for being a reflective listener and say, stay tuned for the conversation coming up right after this bumper. Hello and welcome to Short Fiction Strategies. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and here I am in the virtual studio with Angelique Fawns and Matty Dalrymple. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for the invitation.
I'm pretty excited to have this conversation because you're two ladies I admire and respect who have done things with short fiction, and really important to see what it is that we can do. So I guess the first, and this is going to be a roundtable discussion, so we're going to kind of take turns moderating one another, but I wanted to get things started by sort of tossing out the concept of, okay, so you both are engaged in short fiction. Really? Now? Why? Why now? What about now is makes short fiction an opportunity for writers, and why is it that you find it valuable?
Okay, I can go first if you like. I got into short fiction for reasons of craft. You know, the big dream was always to write a novel, but the idea is so daunting. So I thought, well, I'll tackle the short story first, not knowing I was about to dive into like the most addictive literary pool I've ever experienced. So I found it was just a great way to figure out how to write a hooky intro, how to structure, how to improve my craft quickly without having to spend a year on a novel to find out I'd written absolute garbage.
Okay, and I was going to ask Matty that same question next, but before we get there, while you're talking about it, so you started writing relatively recently, within the last half dozen years, maybe?
So 2018. What happened is I worked in television, writing promos and TV commercials and doing some journalism, and always wanted to write fiction, but never thought I had enough, life experience, or I just couldn't find the time. But then I broke my ankle. I tripped over my huge Cane Corso dog and snapped my ankle and couldn't go anywhere. So I'm like, well, now is the time. So I started writing short stories, but then I found I had no idea where to send them, right? So I tried contests, which was making me poor very quickly. And then I thought, well, I am a journalist. Why don't I research this market and this world? And then, of course, there's your second pool of addictiveness, just learning all about the markets and the publishers and the editors. And I've kind of stayed there. I think it's my happy place.
See, I find it so funny because I got into short fiction, started in the 80s. Okay, and back then, the going wisdom for writers was, okay, if you want to sell a book to a publisher, you're going to have to build a reputation by selling some short fiction. And then, once you've sold a few to a few different magazines or markets, then you can get an editor or an agent to take you seriously because you have a proven track record. And so I got into it as sort of a way to break into the industry, but you did it in a different way to break into the industry. It's kind of like, hey, this is a really great way to own the craft before I start a larger project. So it was a similar entrance, even like decades later, which is
That's
kind of
true.
interesting. And Matty, for you, as I understand it, short fiction wasn't necessarily the start, but something you added later.
Yes, so I started in short fiction because I had written my first two Anne Kinnear suspense novels, and then I had an idea for another storyline that really didn't fit into the Anne world, and I thought, oh well, I'll just write that standalone, and then I'll go back to the Anne series. And then I realized that it was going to be a trilogy. If that was the Lizzie Ballard thrillers. And so I was working away on the first three books of the Lizzie Ballard thrillers, but I didn't want to completely leave the Anne fans sort of out there to dry. So I started writing short stories based in Anne's world as a way to tide the fans over. And it's interesting because I can see, like, in my sales dashboard, I indie publish them as standalone shorts on the retail platforms. And I can see that what is probably happening is someone reads through this series of novels and they're still looking for more in the Anne world, because I always get like bursts of, like, they'll buy all 8 or whatever at once. And then a little time will go by and there will be another burst of 8. So it's very interesting. I'm very interested to have this conversation because I realize that the approach that is sort of recommended, or I'm imagining is recommended, that I have taken based on how I got started and what my goals are, is quite different. And I think it's going to be really interesting to hear different goals and then the different plans people are following in order to achieve those goals.
Oh, I like that. Okay, cool. I still think, and then I want to come back to, is short fiction actually viable today? That's something that, we have our reasons for wanting to do it, but why would we want to? I think we want to continue to do it, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. The viability question is so funny because that's been part of my dive and research was, how do we make money with short fiction, which is actually how I found Mark. Mark gave me some very great advice, and he's helping me make more money with short fiction. However, I don't think any of us, at least short fiction, you cannot quit your day job on it.
That is for sure. Yeah,
Well,
I had.
go ahead, Maddie.
Well, I was going to say that because of the way I've gone about this, because I was really making these available for my fans, for my existing fans. And although I periodically pursue the getting placement in other, third-party platforms and publications, because when Mark and I were working on our book about short fiction, Taking the Short Tack, I thought, oh, I'm going to try everything. And I very quickly found that for the same reason that the traditional novel market is not for me, the traditional short fiction market so far has not been for me. So I've published all of mine as standalones. And so far I've made almost $700 from my Anne Kinnear stories.
Wait,
And that is with something that,
$700?
yeah.
On your
for
short
all-
stories?
Yep.
Okay.
What's
And that-
the time frame, Maddie?
Well, I think the first one probably came out in like 2015. I think I now have 10, one of which I use as a reader magnet, and many of them have. So my goal, Mark is going to get so tired of hearing this because I've been saying this for like 5 years. I'm very close to having 12, and when I have 12, I'm going to put them into a collection called A Year of Kinnear, and it's going to be one story for each month, which is great because almost every month now, eventually every month, I will have one short story to promote. And so I'll promote it via my newsletter. I'll promote it on social media for that month. They're originally I was publishing them for 99 cents. Now they're $1.99. Many of them now have audio accompaniments. And so other than that, I do very little promotion, and it's work that I would be doing anyway, just because, Angelique, as you had mentioned, there are some benefits, like craft benefits, for example, of writing short fiction, and it's just fun. So I kind of feel like it's it's icing on the cake financial wise, because this is money that I'm getting from something that's kind of just like, I don't want to say a hobby, but it's not carrying the same sort of emotional package and financial package as writing novels does.
Where are you selling them? Like where is this, through Amazon or your own website, or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and my own website. I'm
Wow.
currently selling them on Curios, which is a platform I'm very hot on, and is a great platform because it's one that the creator gets more a higher percent. You get the full list price of the item for reasons I can describe if you're interested. But the nice thing about writing based on novels and writing for people who are already familiar with the world is that they're happy to make maybe a little bit more of an investment in order to get that story and support the author. So yeah, I just put it up in the same way I would put up a novel, except for example, well, I'm making my own covers, but I don't want to get into too much in the weeds. Maybe we can talk about that later. But I've sort of expedited and economized the process, but it's very much just like putting a novel up on the retail platforms.
Well, I wanted to get into some logistics for people. So, for example, Curios is a way for direct selling in a way. Could you just the overview? So, you keep all of the money except probably credit card fees or whatever there, or maybe there's some other fee, or is it because you're paying a monthly subscription for that? Like, I want to know the cost benefit analysis, because it's like,
Yeah.
should I be using Curios?
Exactly. I need to know about this.
Yes, it's a great platform, and the way they enable the creator to keep the full list price is they do charge fees to the buyer. They charge back credit card fees to the buyer, and they also charge a small platform fee. So a story that I'm selling for $1.99 on one of the other retail platforms, maybe the buyer would spend $2.70 or something like that. As a result of buying through Curios, they're looking at ways that they can make adjustments so that perhaps the creator takes on that extra amount. But in the end, if I'm pricing something at $1.99, I get $1.99. And when I advertise that to my existing fan base, they don't mind paying a little bit extra when they know that it's going to benefit me as a creator.
That's
Okay,
fantastic.
wow. And that works out relatively better in some cases than the expense of hosting for your own site.
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of moving all my electronic media from PayHip to Curios, just because the process is so much smoother. And I do believe that the experience for the reader is smoother because Curios has their own e-reader and audio app, as
Okay,
opposed to if someone buys on PayHip, then they're like sometimes having to side load it, and they're getting it delivered via PayHip and via BookFunnel, which I think is kind of a confusing reader experience. So I've been
right.
experimenting with my short stories on Curios.
Okay,
In addition to it, as Angelique was saying, being a great way to experiment craft-wise in a shorter way, you can also do those kinds of experiments from a business point of view, and you're not,
Yes.
it's not as big a risk as if you were experimenting with a novel length work.
Can I
right.
throw a third player in? Gumroad. Why would you go with Curios instead of Gumroad?
I don't know enough about Gumroad to comment. But
Okay.
Hey, but I imagine you've done some of the cost benefit analysis as well, right? So,
yeah, well, the benefit is just, I don't even remember. The cost for the Curios platform to the creator is very low. I'm thinking like $20 a year or something like that. Very low.
wow.
So
Okay,
it's negligible.
cool.
And you also aren't facing the same sort of taking a hit. Like if I'm selling something for $1.99 on Amazon, then I'm only getting 35%, as opposed to 100% on Curios, because it's under the $2.99 cutoff for 70% royalties. So I'm also avoiding that hit.
Oh, awesome.
Mark, do
And
you sell any of your short stories? Sorry, I'm curious if you sell any of your short stories
yeah,
as standalones, because I don't know that you.
I do. I do. I sell several. I've probably got about half a dozen of my short stories as standalones. I tend to do the longer ones So 10,000 word short, like long short stories,
Novella-ish.
shorter than novella. And I did that with oh my god, I'm blanking on it, but it was A Murder of Scarecrows is a horror story that I had written years ago, and that was one of those earliest standalone short stories that I published. But I've also more than doing the standalone short stories, I've done themed, I call them digital chapbooks, themed collections. So Snowman Shivers is one that I have, which is two of my family-friendly dark humor snowman tales, and I've actually made that free in as many places as I can. I can't make it free on Amazon, but sometimes they price match in the US. I've still, even though it's been free for years, I think because it's only free in the US, because Amazon only price matches in US and UK, I've still made over $400 in sales of that over the last several years. It's not a big amount of money, but it's something that I'm offering up for free in ebook format. But I also have collected together a bunch of other themed tales, and I've probably published maybe 15 or 16 different. I mean, including the very first book I self-published in 2004, the very first version of One Hand Screaming was just mostly reprints, right? I'd already made money selling them to traditional markets, and then potentially reprint rights, but then I just collected them in One Hand Screaming. And then I made money again last year when I did the 20th anniversary edition, and I added a whole bunch of new stories that have been published and made because I ran that through a Kickstarter. I mean, these stories have made me a decent amount of money over the years. But I want to get into the logistics for people who aren't familiar, if they've never sold traditional publishing stories. So I was doing some math. I said, so a 3,000 word short story, professional rates are 8 cents US per word. So if you sell a 3,000 word short story, you're going to earn $240. Now, I know for a six-figure author or something like that, like, really, 240? I made that while we were talking, selling my books. But I'll be honest with you. I mean, understanding the industry stats, most authors are never going to make $250 a year on their book sales. So that's not a bad opportunity for only 3,000 words. But so I want to ask you both of this specifically, because Angelique, you've done significantly well selling your stories to various markets. And Matty, you've said, not for me. So I want to get the perspective. See, you guys can fight over this, but you can get the perspective of why Angelique, why that's something that you've doubled down on, and why Matty's like, yeah, I don't think so. Not for me.
Well, I mean, I can take this. I think a big reason why, so Matty has a platform and novels, whereas I came into the industry unknown, right? So for me,
Okay.
I was originally just trying to, I mean, if I put up a short story, not a soul would sell it. I know, would buy it, right?
Yeah.
You're funny, Mark.
That was Andy who said that.
But I've done quite well selling to markets. And, I have a method. We all have methods, whereas I take I'll write a short story, and then I'll start with the highest paying markets, and then I'll sub. I kind of have to throw it up against the wall and see what sticks. And this year so far, I'm at $1,800 US is what I've made with my
And how many stories have you sold this year so
18
far?
stories approximately.
18 stories. Okay.
So
So you're averaging $100 per story that you sold.
Yeah, and I write short, so I'll write, this will be 800 word stories, and usually my max is a 4,000 word story. So I don't write very long.
Right.
And for me, it's such a high, right? You write your story, you find a market for it. It's so exciting. And then you meet so many cool people.
Well, let's talk about that. So you've sold 18 stories this year so far.
Mm-hmm.
And you've written how many? So you probably have like more stories, right? Because you've created consistently, and not all of them have sold yet. So you still have IP that you haven't yet leveraged.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. I have about 25 stories that I'm subbing that I sort of consistently send out, being careful not to sub to some of the more.
Okay, please don't use short form. There may be listeners who don't understand what sub is and what sib. So is that me going and getting the sandwich with some?
Some is when you put your story out on submission, and some markets like some of the big horror magazines, they won't let you sub your story to multiple places at the same time. So you have to
That's
wait
the
till they
same
get
sub.
back with a rejection, which is, I
Okay.
mean, I think is torture, unless it's like the dark. And usually, I swear to God, that editor will reject you before he's finished reading the first sentence. I've like sent the
Well, at least you're not
story.
waiting, right? At
That's
least you're
right.
not waiting.
Hey,
Okay.
then you can send it other places. In Clark's world, Neil's pretty good at getting your rejections back to you quickly. But I have thousands. I mean, okay, I sold 18 stories, but how many rejections? I think I told you. Was that like 600 rejections to get those
600.
13 sales? It's
Wow.
a pretty daunting numbers game, but hey, it's just hitting submit, 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 right? So to me, it's worth it.
What do you use to track that?
I have my own very basic Excel sheet. I mean, there are places like Submission Grinder and Duotrope that can do it for you, but the problem
Right.
is when the system goes down or you don't own your own information, you can lose all your data. So
Oh,
I like
that's
to
right. Yeah.
I just have Excel, right? Because when Submission Grinder went down in my writers group, there was mass hysteria and panic because like they couldn't keep track of their submissions. But so I just have a document where I list where I subbed it, when I subbed it, and then I keep track of which stories I've sent to which market so that I don't send the same story twice and get multiple
Yeah.
rejections.
That's cool. And it's so funny. I've used Google Sheets for that kind of tracking as well. And it's funny, I do have a subscription to Duotrope now that I've wanted to take it seriously. So one of the things I've done is I said, okay, I'm going to subscribe to Duotrope with a monthly subscription, which means I have to pay for it, which means, Mark, you better darn well actually write something and submit something as opposed to going, yeah, I should write a story and submit it this month. But now, ever since, Matty, you and I spent the summer revising Taking the Short Tack for short fiction. And as I was going through new examples and we were, things have changed in the industry. So we've added and removed some things. And I've just been reinvigorated to want to give it a go. And Angelique, I've been, subscribed to your newsletter, and every time it comes in, and I don't catch it all the time, but when I catch it, I go, oh, that looks fun. I'm going to submit to them. And then I forget, but I was like, okay, put some money in the game, put some skin in the game, Mark. And I'm wondering if I'm hoping, knock on wood. Let me get my little knock block here. I got my little wood. Knock on wood that this is actually going to work for me. But Matty, you've decided, homie, don't play that, right? Like this is not something that you're interested in doing.
I just think it's not a good match for me, although it's great. I mean, it would be very exciting to be able to say, "Oh, everybody go to this, pick up this copy of this magazine, or go to this platform to see my story." But I think that the couple of things that made me decide it wasn't for me were the time. I mean, when
Okay.
I'm done with a story, I want to be done with it, and I want to like go through a professional publishing process. I want to get it out there. I want to let my readers know, and then I want to go on to the other thing. So, you know, early on when I was experimenting, even just a tiny bit, Mark, when you and I were first working on Taking the Short Tack, and I was trying to try everything that we recommended, because there were some things that you were doing and some things that I was doing. And I think that was like 2020, and I sent a story to Ellery Queen or Alfred Hitchcock or something, and I still haven't heard back. I'm pretty sure they're not going to take it now, but just that time was very aggravating to me. And the not only the time of just the administrative work that was needed in order to stay on top of that, but I was like excited to get it into the hands of readers. And so that was a deterrent. But I think maybe from a more business related point of view, I kind of feel like there's an intrinsic difference if you're writing short stories based on a set of characters, as I am, versus
Right.
if you're writing stories that are based on a genre, which I think is very much what, when I've looked into submissions, they're very genre specific.
Yeah.
And so, and, with all the expectations with regard to genre tropes and conventions and all those other things. So I just think that the potential audience is slightly different. And then the last thing I'll say is, Angelique, I was taking a look at your Substack, and you had a note in there about how you had to be careful on a particular platform because if you didn't mark it as private, it was by definition published. And I thought, oh, it would never have occurred to me. And I feel like you wouldn't, that a writer should really be knowledgeable about the industry in the same way that people need to be knowledgeable about any, business venture they're undergoing, any creative venture they're undergoing, in the creative world. And I see things like that, and I think, I don't know if I want to take that risk. And how is it possible to stay on top of all those things that a writer needs to do to make sure they're protecting their IP?
Oh, 100%.
Well, I've made some errors, I'll tell you that. There's so many. It's true. There are lots of little dark holes, right, in publishing. For example, that was one that Mark and I were talking about. It's a new market, and I just let him know, oh, I noticed this, that you better be careful, because then it's effectively printed. But also, I sold a story, and it was like a deeply personal story to an anthology like 3 years ago, and it just came out. And what I didn't realize, they took my rights forever.
Ah!
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I know. And I didn't really, when you first start, right, these are the things you don't know. I mean, I'm now, I said to them, you cannot, it's a personal story. It's a personal essay about, dealing with getting older, basically. And I'm like, it makes no sense for you to then take all the rights to my own personal story. I said, that's not how this works. And they agreed that I could then reprint it because
wow.
they, but just the fact that sort of thing happens, or if you inadvertently give away your movie rights, your audio rights, your film rights. I mean, this is something, Mark, I know that you often teach people. Mark's been my mentor, and I have learned a lot by listening to him.
Well, I mean, I look at it and say, okay, add a few more zeros, and sure, you can have that article forever. Or that church, like, you just add a few more zeros, and I'm in, baby. But
well, I have a great resource for people on that very topic, and our buddy Michael Laron on his YouTube channel has a fantastic, quite long video, like 45 minutes, very comprehensive specifically about short fiction contracts. What you need to look out for, what are the clauses that you'll see, what are the clauses you should never see. And if you go over to Michael Laron's YouTube channel, you can find that. It's called strategies. Well, if you just search for short fiction contracts on his channel, you'll find it.
And is that ML Laron on YouTube, or does he
I think it's Michael Laron. I think on YouTube it's Michael Laron. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're on YouTube, just type in Michael Laron.
Yep.
So I want to pop up some comments because we got some active comments and questions and things coming up. So hang on. The first one is Published with Andy saying, hey guys. And also, like button booped as well. And SD Houston said she made friends with the like button. Great to see you online. Saw you last week in Vegas as well. But Kat Farrow's asked a question here, which is, hi, Angelique, would you please post your newsletter link so that people can check that out? So, and I'll add that in a banner if you just let me know the URL. Or would this be a good place for people to find a link to the newsletter?
Yes, they can.
They can sign up on the
website. Yes, they can sign up. There's a pop-up, and then there's the bottom bar where you can type your email in, and then I can add them to my Substack. That's correct. Oh, I did want to note really quickly, just so people understand what that list is. Mark, you were talking about how you were looking for the motivation and how do you get your short stories out. You're looking at my personal SharePoint. Those are all the places I want to send stories that month. So I just started making that list for me and then thought, hey, this is some good stuff. Why not share it? So all I'm doing is sharing my personal SharePoint of the stories that I want to write every month.
That's very generous of you.
No, that is amazing. Yeah. So you've already done the research and the legwork as well. But so I want to get into this. So I was looking this morning at some of the markets that were currently open. And before I get there, I'm just going to pop this up. So Published with Andy says Michael Laron is at Author Level Up on YouTube.
Thank you.
I can't post links here as I'm not a mod. Okay, thank you. I'll see if I can post that.
Sorry, I have to do a shout out to Michael. He's got like the most amazing energy. I just freaking love him.
Let's see if this works. If I can post that link into the show notes. Actually, if I only use 2 T's in HTTPS, that might work better, right? So, okay. I want to go back to the question of, I was looking at markets and some of them, I don't submit to markets where I have to pay. So that's like an instant no for me. It's like, nah, no, I'm not paying. But some of the other ones I look at and go, I got to a certain point in my writing career where if it was less than pro rates, I really would not want to consider submitting. But that being said, Maddie, I know you've submitted to a market where you weren't even paid at all. Why would you do something like that?
Well, is there a particular market you have in mind that I should be addressing?
It's an example that I think when we were working on Taking the Short Tack, I think you talked about a specific anthology that you submitted a short
Oh, yeah.
story to that you were not paid for, but you did that willingly.
Yes. So I have had stories published in 2 anthologies. One was called The Oxford Files, which is a noir anthology that was put together by Gary Zenker in support of the Oxford, Pennsylvania Public Library. So Gary put together this very nice anthology. And then the library and Gary hosted an event where people who had contributed to the anthology went to do a reading. People paid tickets, dinner was provided. It was a super, super nice event. And, I just felt good contributing a story to such a good cause. And then similarly, I have a couple of stories in an anthology published by the Sisters in Crime Delaware Valley chapter to celebrate, I think, their 30th anniversary. And so they're all stories that are based in and around Philadelphia, crime stories, obviously. And that was just nice because I've gotten a ton of value from Sisters in Crime, and I was happy to pay it back in that way. And so, when you, from a selfish point of view, you gain goodwill, you gain visibility because, maybe someone who knows an author, one of the other authors in the anthology, comes and reads your work and likes it and goes and looks for more. So, I felt that it was worth it to make those contributions to those publications.
Yeah, and yeah, very, very good reasoning for doing that. And so while I do have that rule of pro rates, I will make an exception for charity anthologies. I did that for a recent Superstars Writing Seminars anthology. I would raise money for the scholarship funds for potential attendees, and I've done that for other charities. I've also done that for some writers groups that I wanted to support because they were using it as a fundraiser. And so sometimes I will use a reprint for those, which usually, maybe you get $100 for a reprint or $50 or something like that. But as Geddy Lee says in that old song that will probably be playing on the airways again soon, Bob and Doug McKenzie's 10 Days of Christmas, or 12 Days of Christmas, is, hey man, $10 is $10. So a few comments or questions. So S.T. Houston says, I'm writing short fiction right now, but planning a strategy to hit 1 hour reads on Amazon. Let's talk about that right. So this is short fiction to get some visibility as an author on that title, and then potentially like that leads to other things probably, right?
Yeah, the 1 hour reads thing is great. And a couple of years ago, Amazon had this really nice search functionality where you could go in and you could say not only like pick a genre, but also the length of time it would take to read it. So it was called Kindle Short Reads. You could go in and say, I have half an hour for lunch, and I'm gonna, I want to read a story that's going to take me about half an hour. They still have that, but they don't really present it in the same way anymore. It's not as easy to get to that filter that enables you to choose by length of reading time. You can actually find it more easily if you go to Google and you type in Kindle Short Reads suspense 30 minutes or whatever it is. It's easier to find it on Google than it is on Amazon, which I think is a shame. It's still out there and you have to, do more work to promote it to your audience. So maybe that'll come back sometime. But I really like the idea of about how big a chunk of story are you looking for?
I've done something very similar where I've taken a short story and the audio version I've put up on YouTube, right? The for whatever 30 minutes or 20 minutes or however long it is. Again, trying to leverage that SEO, also trying to grow my slow and dwindling YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit like or subscribe. I'm almost at 1,000 people after 12 years or 20 years of slowly pathetically trying to grow my YouTube because I'm not like Michael Laron or Dale L. Roberts or any of those other L people with an L somewhere in their name, ML Laron. A couple quick comments or whatever. So Sylvania says, nice listen during lunch. Hope this is being recorded. It is. And it'll appear in other formats later on. It'll come out in the Stark Reflections podcast. It'll probably be available through Maddie's The Indie Author podcast, I imagine, somehow. And
yes, it will.
Angelique plans on using it. So again, this is a lesson, and I'm glad you asked that, Savannah, is the reduce, reuse, recycle methodology I like to use for short fiction. Hey, I've sold this. I've made pro rates. I've made my 3,000 word story. I made my $240. And then I've resold the reprint rights and I made $50 or $100 on it. And I've included it in a collection, a mini collection, and I've made more money off that. It's the same thing we're doing with this content. Is not everyone's going to be watching it live. Not everyone's going to be able to catch the replay, but maybe they'll catch some of the other repurposed pieces of content, like the tips that we'll be sharing from it. So it's all, see, we're doing this by example. We're leading by example here, I think.
It's interesting, the reuse, recycle. I always like to say, like, my technique, because people are like, Angelique, how did you write so many stories this year, right? Mark, you've asked me that a few times. Where on earth do you even get the content? So, you start. Yeah. I start with a flash, usually from Apex or Flame Tree. They have calls for flash fiction, which I find interesting little seeds. So I'll sit down and I'll write a 1,000-word story. And sometimes that 1,000-word story sells. But then if nobody buys it when it's short, and usually the comments from the editors, if you're lucky to get a personal, are like, I want more, please flesh it out. And then I'll plump it up to 2,000 words, which you can then send to the Dark or one of these other markets that have a slightly higher word count. And then if still it doesn't sell, you can plump it up even more and send it to Writers of the Future or one of these other anthologies. And then once it sells, I actually don't do reprints, even though I just find it too frustrating because the pay is so low. Whereas I like doing what Mark taught me to do, is then I'll put it on my podcast and then I'll have somebody read it. And then sometimes I interview I'll interview somebody who's, the editor who published it or something like that. And then I'll also interview the editor and put that on my Substack. And then, as Mark's taught me, put it in an anthology or a collection. And Mark held my hand through my very first Kickstarter. So actually my short stories have made me money over and over and over again. And so now
you also embraced reprints, they could have been an extra 50 cents in your pocket.
That's just it. It's as Matty says, it's the amount of administrative work that I would have had to have done to get that money. Just for me, it's not worth the value.
But I'm going to argue with that. I'm going to argue with you here.
Okay.
Let's fight this.
I'm going to put your fight banner up again.
How many submissions did you send to sell 13 stories?
What did I say? I can't remember. Like maybe
1,300.
Actually, no, it was like 400. I remember
400.
400.
Okay.
It was 1,000 over.
So you're doing the cycle. You're doing the first cycle, and you're going through and sending it, right?
Yes.
The second cycle for the same stories that have been published, which you have a good number of them over the years now. For reprint markets, it's not as much money, but it's kind of like you're already in the cycle. Why wouldn't you just include some reprint? I'm just saying this could potentially, and again, it could increase your visibility. So yeah, okay, I only made $25 or $50 or $100 on the reprint, but my story is now in another market, and then that's more people who discover your brilliance.
So now let me feed this back to you and make it a question. I'll tell you why I haven't done it. The reason why I haven't done it is because I've now taken that story and it's a podcast and it's in a collection. So haven't I now diluted it to the point that nobody's going to want it as a reprint? Because a lot of the reprint asks are like not available freely online or hasn't been published in the past 2 years. Like there's often modifiers.
Well, if you've already released it for free and it's available in those other formats, then that probably doesn't work.
I feel like I screw my reprint rights, Mark.
That's okay. I mean, but you're still, we're all kind of making this up as we go along and we're figuring it out, right? So, More comments to get to. You ready? So this is from Kevin Hall. Says, just a quick hello. Saw you both in Vegas at Author Nation. Talking about myself and Matty. Angelique was not there. You were other places enjoying life, but not in Vegas. So love the conference. Yeah, Author Nation was great. And that leads to a question from Kevin. So we've been talking about, okay, Kevin asks, can you give a definition of what describes short length, genre, etc. So again, let's get into the lengths in terms of, and I know Matty, we had to pull that together for SFWA. Oh, Matty's got it right there. She's ready to go.
So in the book I wrote with Mark, Taking the Short Tack, we included these definitions. So Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association says that anything under 40,000 words is short fiction. And then we further subdivided it that they consider a short story up to 7,500 words. They consider a novelette, that's the word you don't run into much. Novelette is 7,500 to 17,500 words, and a novella is 17,500 to 40. And then we also called out a couple of the other ones, like a drabble is a short story that's exactly 100 words. In fact, Rand Walker has a book about writing short fiction. It is 100 word chapters. Rand is my hero.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. So
yeah.
meta.
Yeah. I wish I had it with me. I would hold it up. And then microfiction. And microfiction generally, I mean, there are lots of definitions, but usually under 300 words. Flash fiction generally under 1,000 words.
Right. And some flash fiction, Angelique, you mentioned Apex. Is that under 1,000?
Yeah, up to 1,000. Up to 1,000. Playing Tree as well. It's 1,000. Like an Apparition Lit, which I'm so sad closed down, it sat up to 1,000. So a lot of the markets have monthly, send us this much, but no more than 1,000. Oh my gosh, there's flash fiction online, right? That's a big one. Factor 4, that's another big one. And these are big pro pay markets.
And they actually pay professional rates for these really micro
or more. I think like 11 cents a word for.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah. They're good markets.
So ST commented 20 more submissions to hit 1,000 subs. Look at you go. That is awesome. Awesome. And again, a story's not going to sell if it's just sitting on your computer, right? And I say that from both submitting to markets or making them available. Now, Sharif asks this question: how do you use a free short story as a magnet to subscribe to an e-zine? So what platforms do you use to distribute the story? You can only sell a free story in Amazon US and not other countries. So I'll explain that last one first, and I'll let the rest of you guys jump in here. So Amazon KDP Publishing does not let you make a story free unless you're exclusive to the platform. And if so, you get up to 5 entire days every 90-day tour of duty you do in their exclusivity program, KDP Select. So the way you make a book free on Amazon is you have to make it free on all the other platforms, and they will price match. But they only care about 2 big markets, really. They don't give a crap about Canada. It's an afterthought for them. I say that as a Canadian. They will price match usually on the US site and usually on the UK site. So all my stuff that's free everywhere is usually only free on those 2 Amazon sites, which is why I guess I'm still making money on all the other Amazon sites, because they haven't price matched. But okay, so let's talk about magnets, using stories as magnets.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've done is the only piece of fiction I've ever co-authored is a short story. I co-authored it with my fellow sister in crime, Jean Gorman. The backstory of that was that when I joined Sisters in Crime, Delaware Valley, I met Jane, and she had I discovered she had a series called the Adam Kaminsky Mysteries, which featured a Philadelphia police detective. And in my Ann Kinnear suspense novels, I did not know this one. I did not know Jane when I wrote this, but Ann Kinnear's ex-boyfriend is named Dan Kaminsky. So as soon as I found out that Ann's ex-boyfriend and Jane's protagonist shared the same last name, I was after her to co-author something where Adam's cousin, Dan, I wanted to use the fictional Dan Kaminsky as a way of matching up not romantically, but professionally, matching up Adam Kaminsky and Ann Kinnear. And so we ended up co-authoring a short story called Blood of the Wicked that is set in Philadelphia. And that's what I use. That's what we both use as a reader magnet for our email newsletter, which is great because our books, hers is a little more police procedural. Mine has the supernatural aspect, but the tone is very similar. The just sort of the gestalt of them is very similar. I feel confident that if somebody liked one of them, they would like the other one, both set in the Philadelphia area. So I have been using that as a reader magnet, that piece of short fiction as a reader magnet to attract people to my email newsletter.
Wow.
So I use BookFunnel to deliver my magnet. So I use my full novels or my short story collections as magnets for people who join my Substack. If going up a tier, actually, if you join, you get one of my books, which is just how short stories are sold. But then I find BookFunnel's the best way. So I've actually made them myself on Bloom, which is a publishing whatever, but I self-publish my own little mini books and then use BookFunnel to safely deliver them. So I think that was part of what he was asking, right? Is how do you actually get them into people? And BookFunnel will send them a link where they can download through their own reader or let people read it right in their browser.
Yeah, and just for those, it's bookfunnel.com. And I'm just going to pop that up on the screen for visual as well. And that's you can use that for direct selling to deliver your audio and ebook, and you can also use that for newsletter subscriber automatically send. I have it integrated with PayHip. Matty, the way I've solved that, by the way, is how PayHip has to send something. I send them a PDF that says you're going to get an email from BookFunnel soon with the picture of the cover. Thanks for buying, because the duplicate bothered me, and I wanted the better tracking on BookFunnel because I found it was a much better tool for this.
Yes, absolutely.
So I had created a PDF that says, "Here's the book you just bought. Thanks so much for supporting me. Take a look in your spam folder for an email from bookfunnel.com, and it should be in your inbox by the time you see this. If not, here's my email. Contact me, and I'll fix it for you." And then that way, PayHip does the stupid deliverable ability that they force, and then they get the real book in their BookFunnel account properly. So that was the challenge. Which you're right. I found that's why I was like, maybe Curios is a better option.
Check it out. I'm very hot on Curios. But I did want to, just because I want to show this, I'm so excited about this, and I'm going to use this whole reuse and getting stuff to people as an opportunity. So in the spirit of trying everything that Mark suggests, I got a print copy of my piece of short fiction, Write in Water.
Well, let's see. Hold it up. How thick is this?
Nice.
It's very, very thin.
Oh, look at that.
So I did this to do two things. One was to experiment. I had never gotten a print copy of a short story before. And I also wanted to experiment with a draft to digital print, like automated
you
print.
use D2D to just make the
D2D.
print version? Okay.
And so because D2D had the cover, which I'd actually created myself based on a template that was created by a professional cover designer, it made the back automatically for me. So I didn't have to go through the effort of making a print, like wraparound cover. But then I realized that it was a little bit too short for whatever the minimum page count was for a print copy. So I ended up adding an author's note, which I should have done before and had never done. I added an author's note specifically.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. An author's note. Yay.
And then I also created a little like a frontispiece image.
Oh, that's cool.
To add. And so I think this is, Mark, I know I'm totally cribbing from you, but you had suggested this kind of chapbook size print edition, for example, for like if you were selling at an in-person event and somebody, you could say like, buy 2 of my novels and you'll get a print copy of my short story for free, or, just as a premium handout for people at a conference or something like that. But I was so jazzed up about my print copy. I had to make sure I showed everybody that.
I'm glad you did that. So, and here's the other thing. So, I do a lot of in-person events, right, where I sell physical books, and I have a lot of different books. And so they're expensive, right? They can be $6 or $7 just for the print charge, if not more, depending on what you factor in shipping and stuff like that. So somebody's really eager and I think they'll really like my stuff, and then I give away an entire book, like that gives away an opportunity to make $15 or $20 or whatever it is. But one of those, I'm only giving away $5 worth, or less than $5 for printing. And you said you were using, that is a cool strategy. Draft to Digital offers free ISBN. They take your short story or your Word document or whatever, and then you can make it into, I think it's what was the page count on that, Matty? Like you had to have a minimum page count, right? That's why you added the author note?
Yeah, I think it has to be 24 pages.
24, 32, maybe something like that.
I think it's even less than that. So the story itself is 18 with the author's note. That's another couple. So you may be right. It may be a little bit more, but it's right around there, like much less than I would have expected.
So a longer short story. And that's one of the reasons why I've done the mini collections where I have 3 5,000 or word or under stories. And I think, Angelique, you did that for your Kickstarter, right? You had 3 different themed mini story collections.
That's right. Yes, in fact, and Mark's in it, and he did all my forewords. So
I did the forwards because well, you write horror, so I kind of like your stuff, right? So
yeah.
All right. So there's a dedication to writing, and how do you decide? So Matty, you do write short fiction, and I know, Angelique, you do write long works. I know you're agent and you're working with an agent to get those works through the traditional publishing. So you're both working on long and short. How do you decide, and how do you toggle between the two, long versus short?
I'm dying to hear what Matty has to say.
Well, I think that a lot of my short stories have been triggered by me having a just sort of like a standalone thought about anything. And so, as an example, I wanted to fill into more slots of my someday Year of Kinnear thing. So I just came out with a Halloween story and a Thanksgiving story. And I was thinking about what would happen, like, it's always family together at Thanksgiving. And Anne is someone who is often engaged as a professional woman who communicates with the dead. She's often hired by people to contact family members. And so I thought, what's a story I can tell that is about, family and contacting family. And so that morphed hugely from that original idea to an eventual story. But it was like, it was a story that came in, like I could expand it to a larger work, but it was kind of just a nugget. I've often heard the scenario of, the amuse-bouche of a short fiction or the full buffet spread of a novel. And this was just this one little interaction that I wanted to capture in a story. So I think I'll have the idea, and then I just have a sense of like, how many words is it going to take in order to convey that in a way that's going to be satisfying to the reader.
Cool. All right, Angelique, did you have a chance to mull that over?
Of course. Well, here we go. So as anybody who follows me knows, and as you know, Mark, I'm looking for the money. As a writer, I know it's about art and you shouldn't tie your creativity to, but I'm looking for the money. There must be a way to make money in this because some people do. In fact, I'm sitting here with 2 full-time authors, so it can be done. I just haven't found it yet. But one thing I know for sure is I probably maxed out the income I'm going to get from short stories. I'll share. I made about $1,800 this year, but that is not going to, that pays the mortgage for maybe a month, not for a whole year.
Right.
So I'm trying to go longer because I think the potential of actually breaking through and doing what you two have done and being a full-time author, you need to go long. Mark is probably the most successful short story author I know and has done more with the short stories than anybody else I found in my years of research, which is why I'm a follower of Mark. But I am trying to extend my writing. So I wrote my first novel. And my trick, here we go. Here's the big secret. Here's the big trick. A lot of the short stories I'm writing now are in the worlds of my novels. So I'm using my short stories and trying to build them. Okay. So I sold a few short stories in my cowboy romance world. And then, you sort of try and put them together. And then now my current novel, which I just finished the draft, I have sold maybe 8 to 10 stories in that world, which then, so I'm working on both at the same time, right? So the short stories are creating the world building for the novel that I'm working on now, which gives you the chance, like you were saying, Matty, to experiment. So
Right.
there you go.
That's very cool.
And SD Houston says, that's what I'm doing with my short stories. They're all in my world. So let's explore that strategy a little bit more. You're getting revenue while you're waiting for bigger revenue, right? Your agent's going to sell this book to a publisher and you're going to...
Of course she is.
But also, you're building an audience for the characters in the world that maybe help with the, it's like, hey, look at this. I've gotten sales already, so even as your agent's pitching, they might be able to use like, wow, this story is really, people are loving it. But then once the book's out, they have more things to get. So it's not just a single book. We always tell, right, Matty? We've long followed if you have a series, it works well because then one thing links to another, and that's where the short stories fit in for all of us, I guess.
It's like it's like your book, The Short Tacks, right? The short tacks are, but there's a bigger journey, even if you're going from side to side to side in your little metaphorical boat.
I'm always gonna clip that video of you doing the little visual short tack whenever I need it. So thank you. Here's a strategy as well I wanted to share that's worked well for me. And for the longest time, all I had was short fiction. I didn't have novel length works, really. I mean, 2014, I released my first novel. I released my second novel, 2016. Before then, before 2020, when I started writing a series of novels, I had nothing but short fiction. And so I didn't have much else to play with. So I played as hard as I could with the toys I had. I leveraged them. But one of the things I discovered that was audiobooks. So audiobooks are expensive. You can use digital AI narration now that makes it free or really inexpensive. But I was using human narrators. Like the first audiobook I did was $4,000. And my apologies, I published 2 novels in 2014. I forgot one traditionally published, one self-published. Whoops. Completely forget sometimes what books I've published. But I had a short fiction. And so while it was like $4,000 to $6,000 to have an audiobook made with a human narrator, a short story that runs half an hour, if I'm paying $300 an hour, only cost me $150. And through the cost per checkout method by getting them distributed to libraries, that's where I realized cost per checkout could add up, because these mini collections or short stories were not selling on Audible, but I was making my money in little fits and starts, little bits of income from that cost per checkout. And again, that's short fiction as well, as like little bits of income, nothing dramatic. But again, $1,800, let's go back to this, $1,800. Most authors are not going to make $1,800 selling their full-length books in a year online.
Wow. How sad.
And again, not trying to be a downer, just trying to point out the realities. It was like, you're thinking, $1,800, that's not much. Well, guess what? 1800s, the authors out there going, oh my God, I lie awake at night dreaming about making $800 in a year on my writing.
Well, I also wanted to say another benefit of having audio. And Mark, I have 2 audiobooks of my short stories, thanks to you. One was a recommendation you had made to Eric Brian Moore, I think, who used to have the Pocket Pulp podcast.
Yeah.
And he was looking for content for his podcast because he wanted to, get a portfolio out there as an audiobook narrator. He narrated my short story, All Deaths Endure. And played it on his podcast. And then just recently I won a narration by Aaron Forrest for another one of my books. And the really nice thing about that, and I'm going to go back to Curios for a moment, is that if you add in audio to, like, if you sell a package of audio and ebook together, then you've created a new package, and there's not this price parity issue of, are you selling something for less on Curios than you are on some other platform?
Oh my God,
and so I can add the audio to All Deaths Endure, for example, and I charge an extra $1. Now it's a whole new product. No, there's no issue of price parity with other platforms. And so just being able to have that additional piece of content, I think, is really valuable. It serves a listener need, and also, gives you more sales options.
Wow. So, all right, we're getting close to the end. I think we've talked about some really cool things, but I want to give you guys a chance to not rapid fire, but sort of what's a strategy we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure people understand about short fiction that you think can benefit them.
I can start. All right.
Why don't
Definitely.
you
I
start
have
us
some
off?
rules. I have some rules. Rule
Okay.
number 1, these are things you should remember if you're going to do short fiction. We don't pay to be rejected. So do not submit to anything that asks for fees. I think that's one of the most important.
Okay.
The second rule I have is I think it's okay for writers of Maddie's level and Mark's level to only go for pro pay. But I think if you're first starting, don't be afraid to get that $10 for your short story. Or even my very first short story was $2. And then I managed to get a pro in the next one. But for that $2, I probably have gathered more fans and had more people contact me saying they loved that story on that free online Haunted Montreal story, death metal fan, which was very weird. But anyway.
Great story.
Thank you. But you see, I think don't be afraid when you're just starting out to go for those lower paid things. And then my third and most important rule is submit. Don't worry about being embarrassed and thinking, oh my God, this isn't good enough. Remember, some of these editors are literally guys sitting in their basement, right? Like you don't, it's true. And they're wonderful. But like, and then when you do meet the biggest editors like Janet Hutchings from Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, or, the biggest editors are often the sweetest, least judgmental people. And I've thrown some terrible stories out there, and some of them have reached out and been like, this is terrible, but we'll help you. So my point is, and then that's helped me become the writer I am. So just don't be afraid to submit. Just put your stuff out there. What's the worst that's going to happen? Right?
And I love that. And I'm going to skip the advice. And yeah, you know what? I said I got to a point where I didn't want to sell.
That's true. Rate. Absolutely.
However, my very first published short story, I was just looking for it on the shelves to see if I could find it. My very first published story with 92 was $5 and a contributor's copy. And I never got the $5.
Oh,
it's okay. I still have the contributor's copy. And it's so precious to me. And I did reach out to the editor recently and said, I saw her on Facebook and I befriended her and I said, you made a huge difference. After years of rejections, I started submitting in 85 and it was 92, hundreds of rejections later. I finally sold my first story. And I said, thank you. You helped me, because when everyone else was rejecting my stuff, you saw something in my writing and you made a difference in my life. So it was so cool to be able to do that. So yes, that I didn't care that I didn't get my $5. I'm so happy to see my story in that little digest magazine. So Matty, any sort of last words of advice as we take this home?
Well, I love talking about short fiction, and so I have interviewed a lot of people on the Indie Author podcast about short fiction. So if people are looking for more, if they want to check out backlist episodes of the Indie Author podcast, which is Indie with a Y, I-N-D-Y, you can go to theindieauthor.com, go to the page under the podcast drop down that says all episodes, and search for the word short. And you'll find one episode with Sharon Short about an unrelated topic, but all the other entries that have the word short in them will be about short fiction. So that's a great, I've been very fortunate to talk to many experts about short fiction. You can find more there.
Awesome. And I imagine Angelique's probably going to be on a future episode talking about short fiction in a future one, I imagine, right?
Yes, I think so.
Awesome. I just, as we close, I just wanted to say some great. So SD Houston says, thanks so much for this talk. Kevin Hall says, this is very good for me as I venture into more areas for sale as well as different genres. And Sharif says, thanks so much for a very insightful and informative session. Loved it.
Yay.
Awesome. Ladies, thank you so much for hanging out and talking. Well, we talked long about talking short or something like that, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Angelique. This has been very informative for me too.
I learned so much. I learned a whole bunch in this. So I'm
all right. Who cares if anyone watches or listens to this? We've had we know there have been several people that have enjoyed it, but my goodness, Kat as well says this has been great. Thank you. So yeah, I've learned so much from you two as well. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.